Hello, everyone, and welcome to our February Drupal NYC Meetup. Thanks for joining us. Really glad to have you here. So what are we doing tonight? Same thing we do every night. We've got some announcements right now, and then we're going to get to some presentations, and then we'll have some more socializing. And we're ending a little earlier than we have been tonight, and that's going to be a trend. We're going to have some lunch and learns to take the place of some of our evening session programming. So look forward to that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So some notes. If you want to join us on camera, we'd love to have you. Please keep yourself muted when you're not speaking. And a note: please don't use Zoom's text chat. We really want you to use Drupal NYC Slack in the Meetup channel. And yeah, we hope to see you there. So coming soon, we've got 3 different talks tonight. Nadir Hajiani is going to talk about his journey from being a Drupal engineer to becoming an application security champion. I just realized I didn't refresh the deck. This is out of order. First, Kim Kubali is going to talk about why making your website accessible should be a priority. Then Nadir is going to talk about his journey from Drupal engineering to application security. And then Ben Morse is going to talk to us about performance in a talk entitled Faster by Default. And today's meetup is organized by these fine people based on the work of past organizers in the Drupal NYC board. And we would love your help. A lot goes into planning these meetups, and there are lots of different tasks where we could use a hand. So if you've got a little time, you're willing to contribute, it's a good way to get to know some of your fellow New York City Drupalers, and we'll find a role for you. So hop on meetup-organize on Drupal NYC Slack, and we hope to see you there. So yeah, Slack everywhere, but also we're on Twitter, Drupal NYC, and you can use the hashtag Drupal NYC. Please do support the Drupal Association. That's the nonprofit that guides the Drupal project and provides a lot of support for it. It doesn't cost much at all to become a member, and it's a great way to contribute back to the project, and a lot of folks who put a lot of effort in. Upcoming events: Florida Drupal Camp is February 18 to 20, and sessions are due this Friday, so get those sessions submitted. We've got Mid-Camp, March 24 to 27, and Drupalcon North America, April 12 to 16. Their early bird registration ends tonight, and you need to propose a session if you want to present by February 14. Does anybody else have any other Drupal events or announcements they want to make? Crickets. Okay.
Oh, I have one, actually. Yeah. Today, we just decided for Florida Drupal Camp, we're going to have a DevOps summit, and that's going to happen the first day. So if you weren't necessarily going to take trainings, or you're only going to take a half-day training, there's going to be a DevOps summit for that on that day.
Fantastic. Thanks, Amy June. Okay, so a plug to help us organize Drupal Camp NYC 2021. So we rebooted the camp this past November, and we're going to do it again in 2021. And our first organizing meeting is going to be online, and that's tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. And you can find details in the camp-organize channel on Slack, or email camp-volunteer@drupalnyc.org. And there are so many different ways that you can contribute to putting on the conference. You don't even have to attend the conference to contribute to it. And you don't need any specific skills, no experience necessary. We will find a role for you, and a really great way to get involved and get to know some fine folks, also contributing to the community. Okay, so I mentioned we're going to have some lunch and learns coming up. So, we know our evening slots, you're usually joining on your own time. So maybe you can use the lunch hour and learn something on some company time. We're going to shorten our evening meetups. and offer 1 to 2 talks, maybe once a month for a lunch and learn on a different date and time. And we would love to know what days of the week you would join us for those before we start scheduling them. So you can hop over to bit.ly/dnyc-lunch, and maybe an enterprising person will paste that into the Slack chat. But yeah, we'd love to see you there. Also, if you want to speak at a lunch and learn, well, we have nobody booked yet, so step right up. And those talks, whether they're for the evening meetup or the lunch and learn, can really be any length and any level of difficulty, and any topic. It doesn't have to be about Drupal itself, just something that's generally of interest to folks in the Drupal community or folks who might be learning about Drupal. And the best way to get in touch about that is to email speak@drupalnyc.org. Okay, so who is hiring and who is looking for work? If you would like to, if you are hiring or if you are looking for work, you can raise your hand or unmute yourself and say hello and say what positions you're hiring for or looking for work for. I know I can count on Amy June to. Amy June, your company's always hiring, right?
Yeah, we're slowing down a little bit though. We're like really specific with what we need right now. And the specifics are a Drupal tech lead, so like 8 years experience plus. But the job board at Badcamp, I don't know if it's been updated since the last time I mentioned it, but there's a lot of great jobs and a lot of different kinds of opportunities on the Badcamp job board.
Excellent. Anybody else? Jed, I think you've got something you're hiring for, right?
Me? No, I'm not.
No?
But I was going to point out that there is a channel in the Slack community called Job Post, and I've seen a posting recently in there. But
there certainly is, and actually, I can speak to that one a little bit because I'm working on that project. That's with the Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History, and they're based in Midtown Manhattan. And we're in the middle of migrating their Drupal 7 site to Drupal 9, and they are hiring a web manager. Great group of people there. And there's a link to that one of my fine coworkers posted in Slack. So yeah, check it out. Anybody else with announcements of hirings or looking to be hired? Any consultants, freelancers out there looking for work?
Hey, can you hear me? This one,
Yeah, hey Nadir.
So yeah, hey, so you'll hear me talk more about it in my presentation, but I don't look for Drupal positions anymore. But I just had but because I was plugged in and like my previous resume experience shows up, I had a fresh recruiter reach out to me with a fresh position on ties 8 hours ago. So I'll put that in Slack for the community. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Nadir. Okay. Anyone else? Last chance. Going once, going twice. Okay. Introduce yourself. So, yeah, why don't, if anybody's interested, they can unmute and just say who you are and maybe where you are and something that you learned about Drupal recently or that you would like to learn about Drupal soon. Begin.
I can actually go first. I'm presenting later, so I will give a more thorough introduction then, but I'm in New York City and I work for the UN. I have been working on the accessibility presentation and decided to kind of binge watch several other accessibility presentations. So I'm in complete overload with everything accessibility, which it's really entertaining to learn about, but I think it's a bit much lately. But no, I definitely have been learning a lot with that lately. And I will introduce myself more in the presentation in a little bit.
Nice, thanks, Kim.
hey, JD, I'll go. I'm Jed. I'm a software engineer here in New York. I work in the healthcare industry. We do a lot of distribution and syndication of content. And that's something I've learned recently is getting back into WordPress. I haven't seen WordPress in maybe a decade, but we push out a lot of feeds in JSON and RSS, but we're always pushing those out. And most recently, we've had somebody that has WordPress is asking for help ingesting. So I was happy in Pantheon I could create a WordPress site and stuff like that. So I'm learning about ingesting JSON into WordPress right now.
So I'll take that as a good segue. We've been building a using Drupal as the front end to control MongoDB instances, and we can just any data and spit it out as JSON or XML or anything else. And have a new project for an HVAC company, and I just spoke to the company that has the estimating thing, and their entire system is built in on the main stack. So that'd be great for me to just snap in. But with this item, I can grab any data and do whatever I want to manipulate it, dump it, modify it. So I'm looking forward. And then what I like is I have the API modules in Drupal that can connect to almost any other API. So I kind of have the universal translator of data. And that's what I'm working on.
Hello, my name is Ho Lang. I'm with the India Public Library. There's stuck in the back. This is going to be a conversation piece all day long. We are recently migrating most of our stack to ECS, Elastic Container Services with Docker. So it's a series of like different apps, but one of the projects that we're planning to do for long term is to migrate our current Drupal 7 stack onto ECS and then migrating things, the content out into Drupal 8 soonish. So that's going to be an interesting project.
I'll go.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go. Amy June. I am in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm one of the nice things about virtual is I get to attend and see my friends on the East Coast without spending, $1,000. So that's nice. I work for Canopy Studios. I am their community ambassador and accessibility lead over there. And I'm gearing up for DrupalCon. I'm a mentor for DrupalCon. And so I've been clunkily learning the new merge request workflow. And I was feeling really discouraged until I was working with core maintainers and found out that they feel the same way as all of us. So that was very encouraging to know that others face those same difficulties. So that's about what I've been learning this week in Drupal.
And my name's Dave. I am an independent software developer. I'm in the Catskills. And Amy June, if you ever want to give a talk on that, I would love to hear it because I've been banging my head against the wall a little bit on that as well. The other thing, currently, I am working on a project that is integrating Big Blue Button with Drupal. There is a module that does that, but we're doing it a little bit bigger. Big Blue Button is it's kind of another Zoom-like thing. It's used in education where you've got a whiteboard and you can upload slides and chat rooms and the whole thing. There's a bunch, as I said, there's a bunch of educational things that do that. And we are getting it in an AWS CloudFormation thing, so it'll scale out. And that's kind of where my head's been for the last month and a half. So.
I'll go next. Hi, I'm Ralph from Nuremberg, Germany. I'm in content strategy, and lately I finally wrapped my head around config role splits and how they work.
Hi, I'm David. I'm connecting from Peru, though I'm from Australia. And the Sydney meetup happens to be at 4 a.m. So I'm very grateful to be able to find the New York meetup that has a more normal time for me. What I'm learning at the moment, I'm about to release my first Drupal module. So learning a lot about the process of releasing a module.
Hi.
Go ahead, you go first.
My name is Elizabeth Dunn, and I'm from New York. I'm with the New York State Office of Information Technology, and I'm an old school web developer from a really long time ago. Started building web pages with HTML then went through like Front Page and all these old softwares that nobody ever really knows what they are anymore. And now I'm the main person for accessibility for our web services unit. And we maintain the New York State websites, and we use Drupal we've created 2 platforms. One's been out there for a while, and they needed to create another one because some of the agencies needed, I guess, a different type of base code. I'm not coding anymore, so I'm kind of out of that loop, but I work to help developers and try to mentor the agencies on accessibility. And recently had the pleasure of connecting with Rachel Yeager, who works with W3C, and happy to say that I'll be working with W3C trying to help them, or they, for some reason, want my opinions on the type of training that we need to get out there in order to get accessibility a lot more better understood by the people who need to be implementing it. So I just like to listen to you guys talk every once in a while. I pick up something and feel a little bit more intelligent about the Drupal aspect of it. So thank you for having these sessions so I could sit in and learn.
Fantastic. Welcome, Liz.
Okay, I'll go. I'm Eric. I'm in New York. I work for Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Right now, we're deeply involved in a lot of front-end testing. So I'm learning everything there is to know about Selenium type testing, and also something called WebDriver IO, which is it's better. And I'm thinking this might make a presentation, but I don't want to commit. I don't want to commit to a time just yet. To talk about what you can do with front end testing that you can't do with some of the other types of testing that are out there. Well, not can't, but some of the advantages.
Very good. Anyone else want to introduce themselves and say what they've been up to recently in Drupal land?
Hey, my name is Nader. I can go next, and I'll talk a little bit more about my background and my presentation. But yeah, I used to be out there in New York probably 5 years back. I'm currently based in Houston, Texas, and that's when I engaged quite a bit in the Drupal community.
All right, last chance for introductions.
Yeah, I'll throw my hat in there, guys. Doug McCabe with the CWA joint training. We presented at the camp and have been working a lot with Scott on doing some worker retraining and upskilling, and Drupal has been a big part of that the last few years. So happy to sit in tonight in New York.
Hey, Doug, glad you can make it. And any of the apprentices coming on?
I think they are. Yeah, I'm not sure. We didn't actually get the notice. For some reason, I used to get these emails a little bit earlier, and if I can get them earlier, I can get them more widely distributed. But we send some text messages and stuff out, so hopefully people jump in here.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. My name's JD, and I'm based in Jersey City, New Jersey, and I'm a freelance backend Drupal developer. And the thing I learned most recently, kind of relearned, was how to integrate single sign-on with simple SAML PHP, which is anything but simple. Avoid it if you can. Okay, so we're going to move on to our talks. And Kim, you're going to be up first here.
Wait, JD, you doing SAML with LDAP or SAML with Windows Server?
Simple SAML PHP, implementing an identity provider and integrating with a variety of service providers.
If you get stuck, I gotta remember what I did, but I've dealt with that before.
Thanks, Scott.
All right.
All right, Kim. So I will stop sharing my screen here, and I will hand it over to you.
Okay. Oh, hold on. It's asking me for system access to it. One
Oh,
second.
yeah, that'll take a minute. Don't worry. You'll probably have to quit Zoom and rejoin.
So sorry about this. I have a brand new computer, which is really pretty, but all right.
It did this to me last month.
Record the, okay.
While Kim is getting
Okay, I think I have to quit and reopen. So
Yep,
like
yep, no
one
worries.
sec. Okay.
While Kim is getting settled there, I noticed Walt joined. Hey, Walt. Welcome, welcome. And let's see, what should we discuss in 60 seconds? Taking suggestions. No suggestions. We'll just sit in silence.
Why is it? It looks like you're in San Francisco now.
I know, I'm just lazy and I use the default backgrounds from Zoom. I usually change it to when it's nighttime. I usually, change it to this, but.
Yeah, so I have a few Drupal puns for like my presentation. I'll probably let's talk about one now. Maybe good time for that. So the question is, why couldn't the user go to the admin party? Hope my accent's okay. The question is, why couldn't the user go to the admin party? And again, these are really bad puns, so pardon me in advance.
I give up.
Because he didn't have permission.
Boo.
So sneak peek, a couple more of these really bad pun jokes. And also since, like JD mentioned, his daughter is, do you have a daughter, you said, JD, right?
Yes, Ramona.
Yes, yes. So my daughter is 14 months, so I'm kind of starting to get warmed up on dad jokes. So pardon
Coming
me.
in strong.
Yes.
Kim, you're back. Any luck?
Apologies. Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
At the moment, I see a cursor on a black background.
Oh, this was working perfectly, of course. Let me see.
Why is it tech people can never do presentations? Why is it? It always crashes on us.
To be fair, non-tech people can't do them either. So.
Oh, now you're out in space.
Can you see still nothing?
Yeah, still black background. I imagine it might have to do with the Mac permissions again, but
yeah, your video isn't gone.
No, the video is not the issue. That was just going to show me. Oh, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, I had all kinds of problems last month. So you gave you're on a Mac, right?
I am, but you know what? Well, the issue is I want to share.
You have multiple screens?
No, I just have one right now. I mean, you mean displays, right? I mean, no, just one.
Yeah, it's pretty strange because we can see your cursor sometimes. It moves around, but there's just nothing.
Really?
I should just unshare when you share.
Yeah,
and they ask you for your tab or screen that you want to share.
You send me here. You send me here.
It tells me that I'm absolutely sharing this screen. This is so ridiculous. Hold on. And we had actually tested this earlier.
So all we saw is a list of all the secure WordPress plugins.
A way around it might be to email the presentation to JD, for example, and JD presents.
Yeah, but it's going through websites. Actually, let me just try one more thing and just log into the other computer and see if it is some permissions issue, because it should be sharing everything.
Sure.
Okay, sorry about this.
Kim, you could also try when you go to share, going to the advanced tab and doing portion of screen.
Yeah.
Different.
Okay, so it says I'm sharing a portion of the screen.
Yeah, same problem.
This is just, I don't understand what's not working with this.
Oh, it's frustrating. That happened to me. So, Nadir, are you ready to present? Maybe we should move on to you, and I can troubleshoot with Kim.
Yeah. I was actually going to suggest that as well.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you. I full disclaimer, I switched with you at the last minute, so it's okay.
Well, that was
karma.
totally fine until I couldn't figure this out.
Yes. It's karma. It's karma coming back to me. So you're all fine. Yeah, it's not your mistake. Yes. Okay. Yeah, JD, give me just 1 minute and then.
Yeah, of course.
We can start. Okay. Okay.
Kim, I'm going to shoot you a message in the Zoom chat here.
Okay. All right. So, JD, let me know and I can start sharing my screen.
Oh yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, perfect. Try. Okay, let me know when you can see my screen.
Looking good.
Looking good? Okay, perfect. And you can see me as well, I guess, on the other video screens. All right. Hey, hello everybody. And it's really nice to be engaging with all of you. Yeah, okay. So I thought I can talk a little bit about, so I used to be, and you'll see more of my background here, but yeah, I used to be a Drupal engineer in my previous life, being in application security, I think for the last 6 years now. And I thought, so I definitely missed the Drupal community. And I thought this might be a good presentation rather than just talk about, and I think we had a really, really good security presentation last month. I think that was very nice, really good quality. And but I thought maybe let's make it a bit more interesting. I can talk a little bit about my journey is how did I go from Drupal engineer to application security. And also my wife still like to tease me because I used to brag so much about Drupal to her. And she's like, what happened? You know, like you changed sides now. So it's really fun. But I thought this is a good presentation to talk about here. So I'll just talk about my journey and let's go through that. And yeah, I hope it's interesting to folks, you know, and as you kind of hear more about application security. Okay, so like I said, I warned you already. These dad jokes, puns are being coming. So let's take a stab at it. So what did the region say to the content? Any guesses? I've been around the block. Okay. So I know these are really, really bad. Some disclaimers I want to give right off the bat is, so I transitioned off of Drupal, I would say back in 2015. So like, yeah, my puns are some of my Drupal references, if they're outdated, and so please, I apologize in advance. Also, afford me a little bit more patience. I've been looking at technology. I'm trying out this Google Slide. I never usually present a lot from Google Slides, but I'm trying that out. And also this new format for slides. Usually I'm always doing them through PowerPoint on my work Windows computer. So it's a bit new for me. So yeah, please afford me some patience. And you'll hear me say the term application security or AppSec a lot. But so yeah, just some patience with that because that's what it is. And here's my last Drupal joke for now. So I just thought I'll throw one more in there. Okay, and hopefully this is a little bit more interesting. So how much does Drupal weigh? Let's see, can I see the group?
One drop?
You're pretty close. You're pretty close. The Graham one is pretty close. And I heard you.
No one knows.
No one knows.
Minus 100.
Let's give you a clue. It's more computer sciencey, if anything. Yeah. And 1 gram is pretty close too. So.
Well, so you're saying that the drop is 1 cubic centimeter of distilled water.
A program.
Ah.
That's why I said 1 gram is pretty close. Okay, this was the last one. So yes, no more of these. Okay, let's get into it. So my background, or pretty much it's nostalgia for me, because to me it feels like, this was really one of my warmest times of my life. And so anytime I think about Drupal or the New York community, it's kind of nostalgic for me, and it brings back all these amazing memories. So I was out there in New York. I graduated from my, and again, this is not at all important for Drupal, but so I was going to school in Sacramento, California. I graduated from my master's in computer science program, and I got a job working for a company in New York. So the company was in New York City. I lived mostly in Queens, and because my background was a PHP developer, and this seems like a very interesting proposition. I was working for a major not-for-profit, not major, but it was definitely not-for-profit that I was interested in. So I decided to engage with it, and kind of just came over to New York and worked there. So that was back in 2011 until 2015. When 2015, I moved out to Houston, Texas. And since then I've been here. So that's my time frame when I was mostly working in Drupal. After 2015, I transitioned into application security. So a little bit more nostalgia is I still remember, I think back then we used to have these Drupal meetups I think it was in like Sony offices in Times Square, right? So all of that. So it used to be it was definitely a lot of fun. I see a few of those faces, like Eric. I remember you and a couple of others. And I think the community has always been awesome. I was brand new and really, really very nice to engage, and everybody was always ready to kind of talk about things and teach and discuss. And so really, really cool. So I had a couple of terms. So I initially started working with Drupal, and after that position, I went doing more Joomla backend development with Publishers Clearinghouse, and then came back to doing Drupal with a huge PR company, and they had this smaller arm which was doing Drupal websites and Drupal-based websites. They're called Burson Marcellor of Proof. At that time, they're now even rebranded as PwC. I wanted to mention about the PR company part, because I'd never worked in a public relations company before. And I can tell you, it's the most coolest thing to do. They're really cool people, and very informal. And even though it was a major, a corporate organization, but it's such a light environment to work in. So I really enjoyed that. And back then I remember attending Drupalcon Denver 2012 with my colleagues. I went to Design for Drupal. I volunteered in a few places. Drupal Camp in New York City, I remember during the times attending that. It was, I think, one of the colleges, if I remember, it was spread between 2-3 buildings. Interestingly, in first of my few Drupal engagements, I used to for weird some reason, I used to get win a book in a contest or something. So I came back with a couple of books, definitely enjoyed that. So I engaged a lot with Drupal 6. Drupal 6 was kind of coming for end of life, and Drupal 7 was kind of taking over. So it was definitely that time. And by the time, towards the end of my engagement, I was definitely working a lot on Drupal 7, and there were already talks about Drupal 8, and it had already launched, and all the design decisions happening in Drupal 8. Just 1 second. I don't know. I can't see. Well, let me keep this on so I can see your reactions. Basically, sorry, couldn't see that. Yeah. So yeah, that was that. All right. So what was the transition? So I moved out to. Sorry. So I moved out from New York to Houston. And it was a new role. So that's when I transitioned from Drupal to application security. One of my first roles was with this electricity utility company called Direct Energy, which is in US and Canada. And so they had PHP programmers. And when I talked to my new manager, and he was like, hey, we do have good PHP programmers, and you seem to have good background, but we do need somebody to start in like application security. And application security was definitely new back in 2015. A lot of new companies were kind of grappling with it. Also, electricity utility is a lot of like a legacy company that they don't engage a lot with. Like it takes time for new technology to come around in that company. So it was definitely something like they had a budget for it, and they were like, okay, let's put a team together. And so I got to get into that. Eventually, got to lead the program. But like, what do we do when we are in a pretty new situation? Like when there's a client, we have a deadline on a website and a module that we really trust, and we download it, and it's expected to work and doesn't work as intended, right? So of course, what do we do in that situation? Is basically we just essentially just kind of get down and dirty with it and like kind of try to make it work, right? So that's what I did, is probably just trying to kind of get that going, like try to get, make it work essentially for myself in this new environment. So kind of started to learn more about application security, so on and so forth. Okay. So what did I do about application security? So what I already knew was I had some basic knowledge of top 10 OWASP. You always hear them: SQL injection, cross-site scripting, so on and so forth. So I already knew some of the basics. What did I learn? What did I had to learn really fast? So obviously the term AppSec, and that application security is called AppSec, but I would hear AppSec everywhere. It was really weird to me at first. The second thing was about learning about vulnerability remediation. So what is vulnerability remediation? So vulnerability remediation pretty much is basically knowing, so it's just a fancy term for fixing defects, or like security defects essentially. So vulnerabilities are defects, remediation is fixing them, but in the industry they're called vulnerability remediation. Now here's my understanding of why it's called remediation, is basically trying to fix them in a way that you're not patching them, but they're like you're trying to fix the root problem, right? So say if you're just fixing something, like just taking care of the symptom, that like, and if say it's a developer habit to not use like protected statements, in SQL, and they're just doing it for this release, that the problem is not going away, right? The SQL injection is still going to be there, and the next time you, the next time you are going to, work on the code, it's still going to be there, right? So remediation is essentially trying to fix something in its core. That's what it is. So I had to learn about that and start to learn about these security defects and try to see like what's the best way to fix them. So the next thing is shift left, which is more of a philosophy. So basically, if you see it on a secure development life cycle, right? You have the development, you have testing, you have deployment to production, and then the release, right? So if you look at SDLC, that's the steps, right? In a development life cycle. Now there's this whole concept about secure development life cycle where you add security to each of these steps. And the whole thing is, so in the past, when like some years back, it was like, okay, whatever the release is, you kind of test it and find out what the security bugs are. And it's not very different from regular bugs. Obviously it's very expensive fixing them towards the end, right? So that's why this whole concept of shift left, right, is how soon can you find security defects and how soon can you fix them? Because then it's going to be less expensive. It's going to be easy to make the changes. You're going to easy to make the decisions. And also that will lead to less delays in releases and so on and so forth, right? So that's the whole concept around the industry. These three terms, the next one, the scanning, is very prevalent. And you can actually pretty much define the industry at the beginning through that. It's basically, you hear these terms thrown around quite a bit in the AppSec world about static testing, dynamic testing, and what's called the SCA, software composition analysis, or third-party library testing. So what are they? I'll just talk about them very quickly. Static testing is nothing but kind of taking your code base. So say in a Drupal installation, you just take all the Drupal code and you just run it through a tool and see if the tool can come up with finding defects or security defects in these. It will churn out a report or some sort of, obviously some sort of output with saying, okay, here's where we found SQL injections, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing with static testing is because it's a code, so you can think of it like a binary, you can only find those things. So for example, some security defects that can happen on a website, right? Like where basically like cross-site scripting is really hard to find through just running a code through a tool, right? For that, for finding a cross-site scripting, you would really need somebody to kind of dynamically interact with the website and try to kind of break it or kind of try to take advantage of those maliciousness. So that happens more on dynamic testing. Even that's kind of automated now with some tools, but still there is a prevalence of manually doing that for some high priority applications. So that's when you hear the term pen testing kind of thrown around, where it's a lot of, so it's basically dynamic testing, but it's much more involved and has its own sort of domain out there. The last one is software composition analysis, which is basically third-party testing. So you must have heard, you must have been hearing, so a lot of recent security incidents have been through, like, for example, say vulnerabilities in say a certain, like say, like a Java version or a Spring version, or some of this stuff comes out there. I know even with Drupal, we hear about like there is vulnerability in certain Apache version, right? It goes on to impact Drupal as well, and we have to release our own patches in the Drupal world, right? So that's what it is, a third-party library kind of breaking your code, which is like out there in the world. So I would say a lot of focus wasn't on those type of vulnerabilities in the past, but now having realized that any third-party library can also have a significant impact. So you can write your code perfectly and not having any security issues, but say a certain version of say MySQL you're using, or like say CodeIgnite or whatever, like, or like a JavaScript library or React, and say React 2.0, for example, just randomly has like a vulnerability in it. It is going to bring that vulnerability over into your application. So there is a very popular company called Black Duck, right, which is kind of a pioneer in this region, and a lot of SCA testing happens through that. Finally, the whole thing about when I went to security is this ability to say no, which was like really hard for me initially. Is I think in the security world, that's why security people or security engineers are really, really unpopular, because you have to say no a lot. It's like, hey, you found these defects, but you know what? We have a really small change going on. I promise we're going to fix it before our next CR goes out. And guess what? It never gets fixed, So it's like you have to, and it's like, hey, we just have this emergency thing we have to release. And so you just have to kind of at some time put your foot down and say, no, like, no, this is the policy, this is the standard. Everybody's following the policy. We cannot make a one-time concession for you. Because here's the flip side I realize is that what they will do is there is transitions. They'll be like, hey, last time, like nobody really stopped us from doing this. So why are you stopping us from doing it? Like, why did your rules change all of a sudden? So it's just so hard to kind of, make those one-time exceptions. So it's just better to set up a policy and work through it. And so you have to say no a lot and you will become unpopular. But I think that's absolutely okay. That's a side effect. But in fact, I've seen a positive side of it when people start to respect where you're coming from and they see that, like you are on their team because you're basically trying to make sure the application is solid and working fine, And obviously working with budgets is hard. What else is basically, so something else about application security, it's very interesting where it sits in the organization. So you kind of sit between, again, this depends on the organization size, right? So a company, which is a startup versus a 50 people company versus a 500 people versus where I work right now, which is the Wells Fargo Bank. So I'm currently as a senior application security engineer for Wells Fargo Bank. It's a massive global organization with hundreds of thousands of employees. So it's very different where you are, but usually general case, application security teams, they're very close to application teams, but not really part of them because you're working so close to them. So you sit somewhere between like compliance or information security policy or an applications team. So you're somewhere in the middle where you're not the app team and you're not actively developing for them, but you're still very close to them and you are working with them, guiding them. So my role has kind of changed. In my previous company, I was actually fixing defects. So like I was finding defects, and we were like, I had a team of 15 people that was actually fixing defects. So, and in a period of a couple of years, we fixed like, I don't know, 50, 60,000 security defects. So, but going to my current role, where I'm more in a consulting role, consulting in the sense that I work full time with my company, but I'm consulting with these app teams and giving them advisory on how to fix their defects. And but I do have to get my hands dirty at certain times, which I actually love and like. I don't want to get away from it. But it's a lot of advising because these app teams know their applications really well, and I may not know each and every programming language in the world or like their framework. So they fix that, but I have to do a lot of advising. So, and also work looking very closely to the policy. So you kind of role changes, but it's a lot of reviews, what we call security peer reviews, security code reviews, which is where you get to stay closer to the code if you like. Definitely approvals. So more and more organizations are adopting where security up, like in part of a release, previously you never needed an approval from like your application security guys, right? And again, this is in the world of application security. So you have parallelly, you have network security and all of that. So that's not what we're talking about. But in the world of application security now, AppSec people, it's a whole program, and you are one of the approvals before code goes up, you know? And again, it might look different in more agile organizations or smaller organizations, but in larger organizations, you know, usually when you have more people and infrastructure around it, this does become one of the steps, and it helps to kind of enforce certain things and quality that you like, you know, and definitely working with a lot of tooling. So what are some of the prevalent tools? You know, I'll make this link available on Slack so you can take a look. But basically, you can look at Gartner's done. They come up with this review every year where they talk about top tools in application security. 45, which used to be an HP owned tool. So HP kind of sold it to Micro Focus, and it kind of changed hands, you know, a few times. So 45 definitely is a pretty legacy AppSec tool. It's even great right now. It's like desktop based, you know. They have an online version, but so 45 was the one that initially captured the market. So it's used widespread. Enterprises love it. But Checkmarks is definitely gaining more ground. You can see that on the Gartner survey too, is that they came in with like the web aspect and of the ability to easily integrate into CI/CD. Does that work every time? Not really. You still need to do a lot of adjustments, and it can get pretty costly with Checkmarks as well, because you are paying per license, you know, versus 45. It's like a desktop licensing, which is pretty more flexible. But these are the two main tools, and I've seen them being called out in a lot of job descriptions. So if this is something of interest to you, definitely start getting familiar with these tools. I'm sure there's some free trials with them, you know, to play around with, or there's some open source tools to play with. Veracode is another one. I just didn't want to leave that out. Veracode is also very popular, but definitely, you know, less popular than the first two. And a lot of companies use Veracode as well, you know. One thing I would say is because of the nature of application security scanners, each scanner works very differently. And we know this because of like each Drupal developer in a way is different than the Drupal developer and the way they do things, right? The end goal might be this, like the end goal they reach to might be the same, but they may definitely take different routes to get there, right? And nothing wrong with that, no right or wrong answers there. But so basically 45 versus Checkmark, they both have their own philosophies. So if you tested the same code in 45 versus Checkmarks, you may get not a lot different, but you may get very different results. It won't exactly be like you found 145, you find 100 Checkmarks. So they each have their own philosophy on how their scanners work, and companies kind of go by that and use that to satisfy it. But I just wanted to throw this out there. And some companies use both. Like in my current organization, we're always on 45. We're starting to kind of go towards Checkmarks, you know, because of the CI/CD advantages. Next one. So I just also wanted to talk about one of the stretch goal I recently did, and what kept me in application security, or what I did, what I found interesting, basically. So what I found interesting with application security is that I can do a lot of like stretch goals. Like I just don't have to keep doing AppSec things day in and day out, because it's such an up and coming field, and the industry hasn't settled yet. That means everything's fair game. Like you can try pretty much everything under the sky. So one of the examples I wanted to share here was like one of the drawbacks I saw when I came into my current role, which I've been there for 3 years now, is that I noticed that a lot of things we do were on like a email support based system, and there were about like a 500, 600, 700 application teams we were supporting. And I saw that, hey, we can actually use Jira Service Desk for this purpose. A lot of things we do is can be combined into that, because it's a lot of communications with application teams and working with them. That was just an idea. I felt like this structure supported that, and I thought that might be something nice. And I'm really lucky to have a really good manager who's really positive and kind of says yes more than he says no, which has not always been the case and usually doesn't happen. So he says, yeah, let's try it out, let's pilot it. So we begin with one ticket type for like a handful of application teams, and guess what? That was a very successful pilot. So eventually we rolled it out to all of our application teams, which was about 600 or 700 application teams. And there are like 7 or 8 teams like us covering about 5,000 application teams. So eventually, so looking at our success, other lines of business adopted it. And they said, this looks like a great structure and framework you guys have set up. How do we do this? So it was kind of teaching them on how to do this. And eventually you see like everybody now had their own Jira Service Desk site. And it just seemed like, okay, that's a good step. That's a good achievement. But also, why stop there? Why have separate ones for each of them? Like, let's make it more sustainable. So eventually was able to make a pitch to the program, the application security program at the company, and said, there's no point having all these different sites. Let's just combine them, just have one site. So our application team, end of the day, can just go to one location and kind of seek assistance. We just go from there. We figure out in the Jira world through rules and automation on what we need to do and get the ticket to whoever we need to in the right place. But let's make it very simple for the customer. And so another advantage is, even if it's a small team or a large team that is servicing the customer, which is app teams in this case, it doesn't matter. Everybody gets kind of a democratic way to kind of work, and they just don't get left out because they don't have more people to kind of work the back end. So the plan was, or the project is to kind of using Jira Service Desk, consuming the risk reports that we get, creating tickets for the application teams. So that's taking input and creating tickets for them, being able to share with them, which the Jira platform does right off the bat, and then using Jira dashboards. And first the information is in there. Now you can leverage it to put some really good dashboarding around it, export reports that you want, do whatever you want with the data. But now you have it in a much more automated and manageable fashion. And Jira is an amazing framework. I'd never worked with Jira before, but kind of looked at it in the last couple of years. I think it has a really, really good, strong framework. And the good thing is it's an amazing framework. It just gives you all this amazing capability. You can use that framework to do whatever you want. You can set things up the way you like it, no matter how complex or simple you want. I usually prefer towards using as much out of the box as I can, and kind of, using that much rather than making it, complex. So that's an example I wanted to share of like a stretch goal. And another reason for sharing this is, so like all this I was able to do in my site as a side project, apart from doing my application security things day to day. So this just kept things interesting for me, something for me to come back to work and kind of look forward to it as, okay, what else can I do with this? How can I make it more simple, more better? Okay, so what's kept me interested to talk a little bit about that. It is still, so here's in bottom line is that it's still a nascent field if you really look at it. So in the whole domain of technology, if you see of technology innovation of 50, 60, 70 years, like application security didn't even exist when I was in school back, when I graduated in like 2011, I didn't even hear the term application security. So I basically went to school. So this field didn't even exist. And so to me, it just feels like it's ripe for innovation, right? And all of us in the Drupal world, we come from different company sizes and different backgrounds, and like from design or, coding or PHP or other worlds, or JavaScript, with the templates. We all have different, and also having worked through organizations of different sizes and experience with different tools, we all have this different things. So it's very right to kind of bring in all those concepts and kind of introduce that to the application security world. So to me, I always wanted to be like finding my next challenge. And this definitely gave me that next challenge, is that, okay, I just don't have to, always try to be the best programmer I am, but I can sort of take on other complex challenges out there in the world and see how they can be resolved. So it's kind of kept that part interesting, essentially. So definitely, and it's very prime for automation. Now, the biggest talk today, or the biggest challenge in the application security world, is how to get better with CI/CD and how to bring in as much automation as we can. So these are definitely two big problems that the industry hasn't settled on. So I think, and it's kind of trying out different solutions. So that definitely keeps things very interesting. Okay, this is probably my last slide. And okay, so now that I gave you this really huge pitch for application security and talked about how awesome it is, you're like, okay, so what's next? Where do we go from here? Like, okay, yeah. So I just wanted to throw some things out there for that, is that obviously having familiarity with top 10 OS is definitely a big plus, and it definitely helps you. So if you look at top 10 OS, it talks about like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, input validation, so on and so forth, So kind of looking at that and seeing, and whatever say, you could try to think about it in your day-to-day Drupal world as well, right? As you're doing, Drupal coding. But you can also kind of pick up another language and be like, okay, how do they resolve SQL injections in Java? How do they resolve SQL injection in this other language? You kind of play with it, but definitely look at the AppSec concept and see how do they apply in the Drupal world, where it may not be cut and dry that way, right? Thread modeling is definitely a very handy skill to have. You'll always see that on the job description. So maybe trying to thread model your own application. There is a Microsoft thread model is a tool. There's a few different tools. So thread modeling is definitely, I think, a skill that is gaining more in precedence. And I can tell it's a very important skill to have. Definitely folks with, in fact, there are dedicated job descriptions now just for people who are really good at thread modeling. Cloud is definitely the buzzword in everywhere, but definitely in the security world is, how can you do security well with, say, like AWS or the Microsoft Cloud or Google Cloud, like with Azure. So knowing your cloud services and knowing security is a great mix, and definitely those people are really high demand right now, I can say. And they're definitely earning good salaries in general, and especially, and here's the other thing, let me just quickly share, is that I always see these positions which talk about, oh, but we're just not looking for, but we're looking for people who have really good coding background. It's very weird where they say that they, like the position they're trying to hire for a security person, but they will say, we need somebody who is not scared of like getting their hands dirty, who is definitely being a little bit, spend some time in coding. And so that, I think, just works in favor of people on this video, right? Because you've been with coding, you have done that, you know how to break the code, look inside a module, see how things work, right? So you already have that background, and now adding the security kind of domain and knowledge on top of it makes you a very, very attractive proposition in the outside world, essentially. And then finally, the last thing I want to add is that every time you hear like a security incident, like the Target security incident or like the Equifax or anything, and this is just good for your general security knowledge as well, just to improve that, is that, so every time you hear this, and once it's kind of settled, they will talk, or the Capital One, which was a big one, right? Once it's kind of settled, and they'll come out with like, how did it happen? What went wrong? What went right? What they should have done? Just take a few minutes and kind of go through the use case and try to see, okay, what went wrong here, right? What did they do wrong? what could they have done? And obviously they missed that, right? Like with Target, this is a pretty good example of third-party library intrusion because they had some shortcomings with their POS systems, right? So that's a very good example. So as the kind of the dust settles down on these major security incidents, even if you kind of look behind the scenes and try to understand conceptually, okay, what went wrong here? I've realized that that has helped me be more secure in solutioning that I do day to day, or sometimes when I have to solution in an application, and it really helps me understand in theory what went wrong and kind of learning from those lessons essentially. Yeah. All right. So with that, we come towards the end. Sorry, I didn't pause for any questions or anything like that, but I just wanted to go through the slide. Let me jump on the Slack and see. Yeah. So if you have any questions, you want to talk more about it, yeah, feel free to jump in or hit me up. Yeah, the best way to reach me is to kind of find me on LinkedIn is Nadir Hajani, that's my name. I think you can find me on LinkedIn. So that's the best way to kind of reach out to me for now. And yeah.
Nadir, thank you so much.
Back to you, JD.
That was really interesting. Any questions for Nadir? Application security is certainly a maybe a lesser understood space. Okay. Well, fantastic. Thanks for a really interesting presentation, Nadir. And we will move on to our next presenter, Kim, who I believe has resolved the permissions issue with screen sharing.
Well, we'll see if I have.
I have faith.
No, I am still getting the same thing. Hold on.
Uh-oh. Hey, there we are.
Right. So this is working on a different computer. So this should be fine. Let's see. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so I think this will be okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sounding and looking good.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, no problem.
Okay, so the speakers on this are a little bit much worse than my other one. Okay, so sorry about that. I actually have a new computer and I think there's some security overdrive issues with it. Maybe Nadir could help me with that. Okay, so my talk is about accessibility and my name is Kim Kubali. I'm in New York City, but I'm actually from Nevada. I've worked at the UN as a developer for almost 7 years, and I've worked with Drupal for about 12 years, and in web development for almost 20. I'm actually an Acquia certified developer in 8, but almost all of my work at the UN is with Drupal 7, not with Drupal 8. And I help maintain and manage the code base for about 100 websites there, which we have probably close to 2,000 or so, I would say. So this is a talk about accessibility. And I plan on looking at a few websites to show some accessibility issues and features, but every site I'm showing you is pretty good at accessibility. So I'm not looking at the really bad sites. And I know it seems like that's what you could actually learn a lot more from sites that don't do accessibility well, but I feel like you can learn a lot more from the ones that do it quite well. And so this is also going to be not necessarily Drupal 8 specific. Everything I discuss, it's going to be in the context of Drupal, but not necessarily specific to Drupal. It is indeed accessibility, and there's on almost every single platform. And if I talk too fast or anything, just raise your hand to stop me. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about is what is accessibility. And I know almost every single presentation with accessibility starts that way, but there's really some kind of broad, interesting definitions. And then also, where are the guidelines coming from? I'm not going to go into it a lot. I think most people kind of know what guidelines we have to follow and why. And then I want to do a little bit of a case study, look at a website and look at how to evaluate it and what's done really well in the website and what's done poorly. I want to have a brief discussion of Drupal 8 and accessibility, some of the things that they are now doing that are different than Drupal 7. And then go through a few tools to check to see if a website is accessible. And then look at some modules to assist with accessibility. And then I might possibly go over throughout the site, throughout the presentation, just discussing other goals that your website might have that could assist with or conflict with other, with accessibility goals. And so a quick note too, this is not a legal discussion. I'm going to discuss what the ADA's criteria are, but it's certainly not a legal talk. And it's also not a comprehensive approach. I mean, there's a lot to discuss with accessibility and there's a lot of improvements that can be made on any website, but this is definitely not something where it's completely comprehensive. So if you can think of something where I've missed in the presentation, I would definitely agree with you. I probably did miss it. Also too, like I want to actually look at a few different websites rather than just going through different slides. So anyway, like with accessibility, one of the things that we're supposed to be following is what ADA requires. So American Disabilities Act, which offers various protections for people. And so in this case, what accessibility is just the practice of making your website usable by as many people as possible. And I actually use the term in two different ways. So in one sense, this means a website should provide equal access and equal opportunity to people with diverse abilities. So you want specific accommodations for people with disabilities. And if you notice, like what ADA and also the different groups that regulate this, what they mostly request is visual and auditory adjustments. And so what you're looking at right here is the guidelines WCAG. And WCAG is what the ADA looks for to decide whether a site is accessible or not. And they specifically require this level AA. And when you start to go through this, there's almost all of these are visual or auditory. But in fact, so this is most of what ADA covers, but there's no sort of cognitive or accessibility requirements. So it's kind of looking over a whole group of people too. So, but also in addition, accessibility can also mean somebody who is not disabled and needs access under specific situations. So like having an appropriate screen contrast for a person to see the screen on a sunny day or something like that. Or looking at a responsive website on a phone. So I want to take a really broad look at accessibility for different websites. And we're of course also like looking at different goals that we could achieve with this. So these are the guidelines. And I know it seems like a lot of acronyms get thrown around. And so I want to explain kind of how they interact with each other. So in the US, if your site is for almost any website, so it's everything but a private employer with less than 15 people, you have to be ADA compliant. And so this is American Disabilities Act and Standards for Accessible Design. Of course, however, ADA is just a US compliance. ADA compliance and websites revolve around web contact accessibility guidelines, which is what all of these are. And these are established by W3C and WAI, which there's also different accessibility groups within Drupal that work on this. So this checklist has 3 different levels, and level AA is ADA compliance. So after all this insanity, when you read through all this, if you manage a site that is subject to ADA guidelines, which is most sites, you basically have to follow all of these guidelines here, which is pretty daunting, but Drupal actually manages quite a few of these for you. And again, like they are skipping over a lot of the ones that are cognitive disabilities, which is actually a really large group, and a lot of other guidelines in other countries do tend to follow those. So just tell me, I want to make sure that everybody can see my screen when I do switch browsers. So one of the groups I find most interesting for accessibility is older people. So 65 plus, 80 plus, and this is actually a Drupal 8 website. And so I imagine it was probably done within the last few years, and they have definitely tried to make it at least somewhat accessible. So the reason this group is so interesting is because it's growing much faster than other groups. So as a percentage of the population, the amount of 65-year-olds, over 65, or the amount of 80-year-olds, they're growing every single year as a percent of population. So this is a group that's getting bigger and bigger that we do have to monitor. And I know a lot of people talk about baby boomers and like their ability that they are growing older. But not only these groups of population, they're aging more. We're not aging necessarily better. All the things on a website that need accessibility, so like vision is not dramatically improving. There's still people that are getting dementia. Issues like motor skills, sight and hearing, they're just not going away for older people, even though they're living a lot longer. Excuse me. And even people with Alzheimer's or dementia would actually, benefit greatly from a site like that has a very intuitive layout. So one of the things that I use to actually analyze some of these sites is several different Chrome applications. And so, for example, this one right here, this is called No Coffee, and it'll actually just show you different like visionary things that you can do to sort of directly look at the website as somebody with low vision or different types of vision issues like having, glaucoma or macular degeneration. And so these groups, these older groups, they're actually now much more sort of technologically savvy. They're actually more likely to use technology. So a 65-year-old today is much more likely to be using a device than a 65-year-old maybe 20 years ago. They're also, in a sense, though, much worse, technology speaking. They're much more likely to just stick to one device. So not necessarily using, they'll use a desktop, but not an iPad. So looking at this Medicare, so Medicare is actually for the people who are not American. Medicare is our national health insurance program for people 65 plus. And so this website is mostly going to be viewed by somebody who is 65 or older. And it's mostly going to be viewed by somebody who probably is wearing reading glasses or has some other issues. And so when I look at sites like this, I try to go to, there's different Chrome extensions. So this one is No Coffee, that gives you some options. And this is Web Disability Simulator, which is also a really good site. And this can show you different so different issues that you would have with your site. So if you had color blindness or farsightedness, which is also pretty common, it would show you what the site looks like. And in this case, when you first load the site, that's loading pretty slow. It loads with a pop-up modal that actually doesn't directly go away. And when you do look at this with, some site issue, it's really hard to like scroll around and figure out where to turn this off or get it out of the way so you'd be able to see the rest of the site. And so once you figure out how to turn that off, then you can actually tab around like you would a regular site. So the browser extensions that I like to use to check accessibility, and browser extensions I find very convenient just because you can use them pretty quickly. I use two different kinds, one where it's like mimicking different issues. So this can also mimic Parkinson's, which this is kind of hard to tell, but it can show you if somebody has an essential tremor or Parkinson's, that it's very hard for them to actually scroll over some things. But on this side, it's still fairly And so I do a lot of checking these with an actual browser extension. And then I also like to check accessibility with like, there's things like Wave where they will, you can actually turn styles off and it's going to give you a list of any issues on your website. But with this, so like with this site, sorry. One of the things that's the most critical though, is that you can just tab through it. That's one of your biggest accessibility sort of wins because it covers so many diverse disabilities. So when I attempt to tab through this, it actually does work really well. And as you can see, it gives you a few options to increase the text size, it appears, although it doesn't actually increase it. And so there's just a few minor issues with this website, but it's really interesting to take this look at it and just go through. So again, tabbing is your main thing that you want, as long as you can
tab. We just lost you, Kim. The mic sounded like it fell. Wow, you can hear my daughter now. That's helpful. Kim, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
We can hear you now.
Okay, now you can hear me?
Yep, all clear. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, the computer I'm on now is like a bazillion years old, which this is the other thing too. I find like very often older people will be on a computer where that's got low contrast or on a slower connection. So anyway, like, as I was saying, like tabbing through is actually one of your biggest wins, just because once you tab through, there's like, this is how screen readers will read it as well. And once you're able to tab through, this covers a lot of visual disabilities. It also covers like how screen readers will read it rather quickly. There's a lot of people with disabilities that will actually just use a keyboard and not use a mouse, or even if they use a mouse, they're using something that's kind of similar to a joystick. And so by tabbing through, some of the things that I'm looking through is that it doesn't get stuck anyplace. And that's like one of the biggest things. You don't want it to like get stuck anyplace. I should also be able to know where I am at any point in the website. So with this, it's showing that it's selected by being highlighted like that. And so you should be also able to control any of those. So on any of these items, I should be able to press return and it would engage and do whatever item it's supposed to do. So with things like this too, hold on one second. And so with a site like this too, I mean, as much as it does have some issues, it's also a very intuitive approach. I know it's not like, you know, a shiny new design and it's got a lot of like older looking design on it, but it's actually quite easy to navigate. There just are some issues, like, I don't know if you could hear me at that point, but like they have a text increase here that kind of really doesn't work well, or it does a little bit, I see. So an example of like sort of modifications that you can do with sites like this, where they work a little bit better. This is a really new website, of course, thank goodness. But one of the things this site does is not only tabs through really easily, you can toggle high contrast immediately. And you can also toggle large font size. And again, this is all done with the keyboard. There's nothing really that you have to do on this website with a mouse. And so I know accessibility is seen as quite a bit of work in order to reach very few people, but like in this case for Medicare, if they're not very accessible, they're also like losing their main client base. Okay, so what is Drupal 8 doing? So Drupal 8 has added a few things. So images on Drupal 8 now, hold on. Images on Drupal 8 now are required to have an alt tag automatically. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have the local version set up to do some of the demos. I'm sorry, just because I switched computers. Okay, so they have now on Drupal 8, they have that you have the alt tag is required. So anytime you add an image, CK Editor has it set up that you have to immediately also implement, put an alt tag on there. They also have had several additions like additional semantic markup. And all core components use HTML5, which actually helps a lot too, because it's helping you divide up the content in your website a little bit better. And again, this is a screen reader specific thing. You have in Drupal now, and I'm sorry, I had like the demo to do all this, but in Drupal 8, you also have now what is called audio alerts. And so there's different alerts that you can turn on or turn off to tell people, for example, this is where the main content is or something else. And you can set a different tone to each of those too. We have inline form errors now, whereas before you would just get an error on your form. Now it will specifically tell you what line. And then there is something new called constrained tabbing, which will allow you to just set up which tabs you use. And so one of the sites is it Elizabeth? Is that her name? Is she still on? She was for Elizabeth Dunn, she worked for New York government. That's actually a really interesting site to look at. Wait, let me see. Because they do some stuff really well. And then there are a few other issues. So it's a site I had actually looked at recently. And one of the issues here is that you do get stuck. So when you tab through the site, you're tabbing through the background and just need to stop. And just like the tabbing is so critical to screen readers, and so very critical too for anybody that has any mobility issues. And so that's actually one of the main issues with this, is that it gets stuck where you need to tab. But other than that, once that's gone, there's a lot of things that gets in, like skip to main content. You can tab through all the items in a sort of logical order. One of the things that you would want to avoid though is these are links here that are get the facts, learn more, and sign up. So to somebody who is sighted or not using a screen reader or any other device to look at this, it would make total sense that we're getting the facts about COVID-19 vaccination, but a screen reader is going to read this as get the facts, and you don't have any idea. It wants you to learn more and then sign up. But I mean, these are all like very minor things that could be fixed. And in order to like find where there are any errors in the page, you can go back to things like Wave. That will show you each of these like issues. You can view the details on the page where it is. And I know this looks like a huge amount of issues, but it's actually, I would say at the UN, when we evaluate a site, we probably have a few more of these. We actually have a special department that reviews sites to see where there's issues on them. And then it's going to give you issues like which are really important ones. And then it's going to show different features where you are doing things correctly. So you can actually copy any code in that. Let's see. And it's showing you where there's ARIA labels. And so this is actually set up pretty well. And I think this is actually Drupal 7, not Drupal 8. But let me show you too, just a few other like helpful items. And I'm sorry, I was just kind of thrown off because like I didn't have a local version for this. So a site that's done really well is ACLU. They have accessibility really down, and it's a great site to honestly just copy things off of. They not only have tabbing really well, they have like different tabbing in a system where you can actually go and buy taxonomy and stuff like that. And this will take you to different pages where you can tab even more. They have certain things that are set up. So screen readers actually read this as one whole item. So it'll actually read it as immigrant rights, the moral imperative to eliminate the historic. So it reads the whole thing, and then it's a link to that site. So I want to switch real quick to discussing exactly what I do
look for in a website. So the tabbing and skipping content is critical. The skip content is so when somebody goes to a page that they're not listening to the whole menu again, which is what happens. Skip to main content means you're skipping to the unique content of that page. And if the tab order is logical, I'm also sort of looking for that. And that every interactive element is to be usable with the keyboard. You expand, collapse, tree views, sliders, dialogues, and so forth. You don't want that anything automatically starts to move. That's also sort of an issue because certain people can't click on it quickly enough. Again, we want these focus indicators to be on everything when you do tab through them. And then what's also pretty common now is you don't want that when you hover over something that it's showing content for it. So while you do want to show that there is an alternate tag for this image, you don't want the images shown in like a title over the picture. And then there's more accessibility tools that give you sort of a better, I'm sorry. Sorry, not all of these are set up on here. Okay, so let me just go through a few, sort of a few modules that would help that Drupal 8 now has. So Drupal 8 now has modules that work with CK Editor. Oops, sorry. So this is a module, there's a module you can install that will work with CK Editor that will actually check accessibility. So I really feel sometimes there's content managers that you'll develop this fantastic, super accessible website, and then they come back and like, you know, just write sentences that are hard to understand, or they don't add alt tags. And so this is actually an accessibility checker that is a plugin for CK Editor. That there's something similar with Drupal 7 as well, but the one with Drupal 8 seems to work a little bit, like notice other elements that this one doesn't. And so as you go through and you can like add alt tags to anything, and then it'll still kind of go through and like give you other suggestions on what to fix in your content. There's also style switcher. So if you have people that, let's see. Okay, so if you have people that can actually, let me just show the White House one, it's very similar, sorry. So there is with Drupal 8, there is actually a module where you can toggle high contrast and toggle text, but there's also, they have ones where you could actually change the full style sheet. So this would allow you to switch to different fonts that, for example, there's fonts where they're known to work better with people with dyslexia. It can give you the ability to just increase the text or increase the contrast. There's also block area landmark roles, which will, you know, then you can set up block area landmark roles in different blocks like you would classes. And then there's accessibility tool, which is also meant to help people with visual disabilities view content. And allows you to select from pre-selected contrasts. Okay, so I think that's about it. I had more demos set up on a local version, and I really apologize for all the computer issues. But so I think for now, that's pretty much all I had to discuss. Accessibility, though, I would not actually worry about making any one site perfectly accessible. I don't really think that's possible. And I think it's something where you need to kind of learn as you go along. And honestly, I would copy all of these adjustments are actually on almost every single really good CMS. And Drupal certainly has all these things as well, where you can switch styles and everything else. And I would honestly, just as much as possible, copy some of the functionality of sites like whitehouse.gov or American Civil Liberties Institute and any of the other websites I showed you. They are actually doing quite a few things very well as also. There's definitely some UN sites that are absolutely horrible accessibility wise, and those are sites that we're focusing on now and trying to switch over to Drupal 8. So I think that's it for now.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Kim. That was great. I'm sure we've got some questions for Kim. Who's got a question about accessibility?
I do. Oh, go ahead, David.
Actually, Dave, you go.
Oh, Kim, you showed several government sites. Have you, what do you think about, like, there's that USWDS federal kind of guideline or project? Are you familiar with that, or can you speak to that?
Sorry, I'm actually not. What is it again?
USWDS. It's a project. It's a federal government. If you just Google USWDS, I think it's designsystem.digital.gov, but they basically come up with, it's essentially a framework for creating federal government sites. And so I think if you scroll down on their Veteran Affairs and NASA and vote.gov and a bunch of them use that, and it really does, it does some cool things. There are a couple Drupal 8 themes. There's two competing kind of USWDS Drupal 8 themes, and they seem to work really pretty well. I've done a couple, I did a local government site with that, and they were concerned about accessibility, and they kind of came up with, well, if we use this federal guidelines and someone has a problem, we can kind of point to that and said, well, we really tried. But if you look at the, the results actually, I think seemed pretty good. So
yeah, I'm looking at the side on the other computer. It does actually look really good, and they have demos on about the websites too that look very interesting. No, I'm all for copying anything. I mean, to me, it's just like, there's really, on things like this, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. There's so many people that have done really great things. And I think it's really hard without engaging people with disabilities. So we do have groups at the UN where they get together, and some of it is people with disabilities, and some of it is people that are making either physical or technology adjustments for these people with disabilities. And it's really interesting how they view sites. So like, there is somebody who is partially blind and does use just tabbing and has really never used a mouse in her life. But on the other hand, she can see the screen, I mean, to a certain extent. But I am all for these things where they sort of standardize and make it like, just there's got to be a more vanilla version of this. It's what I think is very difficult is when people try to do these very clean, sleek designs that have low contrast and everything else. And it looks like it's just very hard to mesh with any type of accessibility type things.
Well, if I could add, one of the things on that I thought was really cool is they have a bunch of they have all kinds of color codes, and essentially, and those are all in CSS, and they're all numbered. And essentially, if you pick two colors that I think, it'll be like red 80 and blue, 110. And as long as the difference is more than whatever the magic number is, 40, then you know that you're going to be able to get the right contrast. Because that was one thing people would constantly try to pick colors that didn't, you had a link hover thing and that would kind of break it because it didn't have contrast with the surrounding text in the background. And as long as you kept in the number scheme, you could give people the right choices and know they weren't going to mess up. So
yeah, there's actually ratios that they have for that. It's not even, I mean, like a lot of these things are just sort of, people think, well, I need to have a high contrast site, but there's specific numbers for it. It's a formula. It's not just, it has to look like it's high enough contrast. And there's a lot of people that cannot see well at all when it's like something dark on something white. And so that's why most of those sites where they switch to high contrast, they switch to whatever text it is on black. No, but these actually have like a lot of really great websites. And the website itself is pretty good too. No, thank you for that. That's really good.
The other thing's been reported that building for accessibility also helps SEO.
Oh yeah.
Which can help you sell it to, I have clients who don't want to do it because they don't want to spend the money.
Yeah, so I mean, if you think about it, developing for Google, you're essentially developing a website for, sort of a big blind robot. Google isn't looking at all these pictures. They want to know, what the alt tag is on this. And so this is another thing too. There's actually programs that will use AI. So Azure has a program where they'll use AI to give a description of the image. And so you can even have that. And there's a module in Drupal 8, I think, that will actually connect it to like the AI robot that will actually describe the image for you. And so you don't even really have to have people going through it, although of course they could probably give it a much better description. But Drupal isn't, I'm sorry, Google isn't even looking at like, what the site layout and everything else looks. In fact, they very often skip over the CSS and they give higher rankings to sites that are very accessible. So, if it has like a great description, if the headers all match the text underneath it, if you don't have redundant links is another issue too. So, a more accessible site is definitely going to rank higher. And also it gives you a lot if you share pages on social media. If they're very accessible, then they have much better descriptions. But yeah, I think it's something that should be a part of people's workflow, and it definitely helps SEO rankings a lot.
Hi, Kim. This is Liz. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button when you were looking for me before.
Oh, you know what? I can't criticize anybody tonight at all.
I'm like, I was so spastic trying to look around. I'm like, where is it? But yeah, our sites are the one you looked at is Drupal 7, and it's going to be upgraded to Drupal 8. And actually, in that platform, that particular platform, one of the big things was the non-descriptive link text. And ARIA labels, there are ARIA labels that are behind the scenes in some of them, but that platform is going to get upgraded. Our newer platform that's coming into being now, it hasn't been launched yet. There are places for the content editors to add an ARIA label, and we're going to be developing training on explaining to them what they need to do in the content editor interface to actually make sure they don't break the accessibility after we put it in. Because we can code accessibly and then have somebody, like you said, not add alternative text for images or do click here all over a page, and right away it doesn't matter how well we coded because they just broke the accessibility.
Yeah, so the CK editor is actually used in Drupal 8, and this will give them notices if they've done something wrong. Now, of course, they might still keep, doing it wrong or just leave it as is. But this is actually something that could be pretty useful, and it uses, it gives an explanation too. So I think that's actually pretty helpful. I think there's so many people where they see it as a huge chore, like they know that they're, losing people, but they think it's a very small percentage. When in reality, we have something like 20% of people that will either have some temporary disability or a permanent disability, which is huge. And then not to mention, too, like New York Gov would definitely cater to a lot of people with various disabilities. But I like this because it does actually give a reason why. It doesn't just say you mess this up. And so you could go through each of the errors that this one has. So paragraphs must not be used in headers. And this is something you can integrate with Drupal. It just needs a library added.
Right, and that's one of the things I'm definitely going to share with our developers, because like I said, one of my staff people, she's she develops curriculums to help train our developers and to train our agencies, because we also use Site Improve. Anybody who is hosted on our site and uses one of our two formats, who works with us and doesn't go to an outside vendor, Site Improve is part of the package, and Site Improve has accessibility features, and now they have that page-by-page plugin. But individuals can, the agencies get site reports on every 5-day basis that gives them an update of how accessibility is on their site. So their editors can fix what they can fix in the text portion of it, and it also tells them about PDFs. So there was another module that you mentioned that's a Drupal module that I missed writing down that I was hoping you could mention again besides the accessibility checker, because I wanted to look into that one also.
So I mentioned about 4 or 5 different modules, but I think there's like a good 20 that are really useful. So block area landmark roles is really good, which will add landmark roles to blocks. So there's a thing called block class where you can add a class to a block, and this will allow you to actually add a full area landmark role, which is really great. There's an automatic alternative text, which is pretty good too.
I think we have that one because I know they can't put a picture in there without, of course, they can put a space in.
Well, yeah, so that's actually in Drupal. So in Drupal 8 has that in core that you have to enter an alt text. You can turn it off, but I think that's a really great accessibility. There's also, let me see, there's style switcher. And then there's also—
Oh, that style switcher, that was the one that I heard you say, and I forgot to write it down.
Yeah, style switcher, and then there's also, let me see, accessibility tool is kind of more similar to what I showed you on White House. And this is actually WordPress, not Drupal. But so accessibility tool does something like this, where you toggle larger font size or toggle high contrast. And, you know, there's another group that I know uses the style switcher, and it's a little bit more, I don't know where it is, but it's a little bit more, so you'd actually like tab, and then there'd be like a link that would say, you know, would you like to switch styles? It's a little bit sort of large, and so from a style perspective, a lot of people won't go with it. But you can do things like switch fonts. You can switch a full style sheet as you're going along. And so there's a lot of adjustments you can make. To me, that seems like it's one you would have to copy another, like really look at another website and see, you know, how that's going to work, because it does get to be, you're developing 2 separate style sheets. And so it would really be kind of daunting to do it.
Right.
But I think it would be, if it's done really well, it would be amazing.
Yeah. So thank you for all the extra tools. You know, and there was a person who said something about, you know, the customer not wanting to invest in accessibility because, you know, too few people or whatever. There's a legal firm that puts out wonderful articles on how the cost of accessibility is going straight through the roof and how it's increasing.
Yeah.
It's Seybarth, Seybarth, I believe it is. And I'll look for the link and add that if that helps anybody. And W3C on their website has a great area in the tutorials and advocating section for accessibility, where it talks about how to build a business case to convince a business what a good idea it is to go accessible. Because the cost of a lawsuit is going to be way bigger.
Yeah, and I think it's too, once some of these lawsuits do come out there, of course, that's going to make people realize that, you know, it's not a bad thing to do. But so this is the thing that I was saying, where they're actually using different style sheets for this. So like increasing line space and enhancing. There is one other one.
That's great.
Yeah, there's one other one that changes fonts too. And so this is a Drupal site. And the one that changes fonts, you can change to, there's dyslexia friendly fonts. But yeah, I mean, like, I think it's also too, a lot of the accessibility adjustments you make are things that will get you other users that don't necessarily need accessibility, or they're just like have, you know, no disabilities. And so I think it's something where it makes stuff extra useful. Like here on the subway, people are always like finishing the rest of the show watching closed captions on their phone. And that's something that was developed for accessibility.
Yeah, yep. I actually put closed captioning on my home TV because we bought a house where the living room, kitchen, and dining room are one room. Never thought about my daughter coming out and starting to cook a meal in the middle of a show.
Of course.
Yeah, Kim. When you
Yes.
mention the alternative text, are you talking about the alt tag or the text that goes underneath the image?
No, definitely the alt tag. The alt tag, what Google's going to read.
Because another thing that I've seen done is putting a description of the image underneath the image.
Yeah, so that would, I mean, like, Google's still going to associate, if you have any alt text, Google's still going to associate that with that image. And so,
Okay.
and that's really what you want, is that the content on your site is matching the headers, that it's matching the title. And these are all things that, you know, Google gives us completely unscientific, you know, points for, whatever it is. But Google even has on their website now, like, if you go through these things, how to get good SEO ratings, a big factor is now accessibility. It makes the site easier for them to read too. So this is one too where it shows that it allows you to do different fonts. My issue with this is you could change the site to Comic Sans. So I'm not certain why that's helpful, but
That should be illegal.
I just thought it was pretty funny though. But there's definitely fonts. There's a font specifically designed for people with dyslexia. The research behind it says that it might work. But these are some different adjustments you could do. And all it's doing is changing to a different style sheet. So you could also have just like 10 styles and have everything else exactly the same.
Can you choose the fonts you want to change the font used?
I'm hoping that it's not required you have Comic Sans. That would seem a little bit silly to me, but maybe it's
No,
an
but that-
accessibility thing I didn't know about.
That would actually be good in developing a site to show your client different fonts, because they usually choose a font almost by throwing a dart against the board.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's people that lack a sense of humor or something and it's supposed to help. But no, actually, Arial is one of the fonts where it's supposedly easiest to read. And so that's actually pretty common.
I'm using a web tool to do drawing HVAC, and the fonts are so thin that you can almost not see them because it's a very bright background. So they almost, and you know, the contrast is horrible and it almost vanishes.
Yeah, and it's hard to people, like, I think if people start this from the very beginning, like, I think Drupal does a lot of accessibility first. And then they add on other design features, which is really useful because you have people that get this like really clean design, or they use some design elements to sort of like, you know, click the red button. And if you can't see a red button, that's not really helpful. But Apple actually used to do that quite a bit, where they would do design elements that were probably accessible, but they were just like so clean and thin, and it was just really hard to see. But they don't anymore. I actually went through their site because I was going to show that, but now they look fantastic. So.
Well, Kim, that's fantastic information all around. Thank you so much. We do have to get to our next
Great.
presentation.
Thank you.
We're running a little late tonight, but yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks.
And with that, I will turn it over to Ben Morse, who's going to talk about faster by default, some performance, and he might have something to say about what was it, Google being a big blind robot or
blind robot. Yeah, it's a great one. I think there's more to it than that. I want to remember that quote. It's also kind of late. It's 8 o'clock. I know you were going to finish it today at 8:15, and that also includes a social hour. If you prefer to put this off till next month, I'm fine with that too. I'm around all the time now because we're all around all the time now. It's really up to you.
Oh, that's very gracious of you, Ben. I think we should plow forward. I know you weren't planning on talking for very long, and that'll, I think, keep the logistics simple.
Okay. All right. Let me increase my sound level over here a little bit, and we'll be off to the races. That's not it. That's not it. All right. No, that's interesting. Wow, that's fascinating. That's a very strange automated search that the Mac just did for me there. There's some more sound. Okay. So let's see. I'm going to share my screen, which I guess is going to stop your screen sharing. And I've got to choose among 4,000 different things to share. I don't use Zoom to share screens that much, but I think this must be it. And all right, there we are.
We are.
It's a top. let me go back to something that talks about me. So I gave a few talks at Drupal events last year, I guess all virtually because it's how things are done now. And it just shows a couple of slides from a couple of those talks, put them together, and there we are. Just talk about core web vitals a little bit and page speed, and then some efforts that are being discussed in the Drupal community to make all Drupal sites maybe faster by default. We'll see how far we get in the next 15 or less minutes. So this is me. I'm Ben. I'm a developer advocate at Google. My job is to work on the web. You can see behind me here, this is my former attic music studio, now where I spend almost all my time. And here to discuss web vitals. So people have web performance for a long time. Many sites are too slow. Usually I discuss why this matters and why it matters for lots of people. Actually, Kim, I often discuss it in terms of accessibility these days, that a site which is too slow isn't accessible to a lot of people in the world who have slower connections or have lower powered phones and simply can't access websites or can't access them conveniently on their phones, on their connections they have. I'll skip all that for now, as we'll assume you all know why it's important to make sites that are fast, because maybe on your home computer, on your amazing new fast like gigabit Wi-Fi, it's excellent no matter what you load up. But for many people out there who are on 2G or 3G connections or unreliable connections or phones that are lower powered, things that are nice on your fast computer are actually slow or janky on their phones. So after much discussion, after a couple of years of discussion, I think people at Google and various other places came up with the idea of core web vitals, which are 3 metrics you can use to think about your site being kind of a good user experience. We can't really go into some things on this, but it's just a way of measuring speed, ease of use, those kinds of things in a way that a computer can measure. This was, it was announced last year that this would be incorporated into Google Search as an incentive. So you probably know already that Google Search and I think other search engine search as well have a ranking signal that involves page speed, have signals that involve things like, is your site secure? Is it mobile friendly? So what they did is they announced that they're going to, in the near future, incorporate these page experience metrics into ranking criteria for top stories and to, in general, involve core web vitals in search ranking. So this is actually going to happen in May, it turns out. So you may have seen this before, possibly if you go to Google Search on your phone, you'll see this thing on the top called the Top Stories Carousel with various news items there you can scroll between. In fact, I can show you this if I'm really clever by going to Chrome here, claiming to be some sort of phone and making this a lot bigger and going to google.com, looking for some sort of news. Like, look at all these things I'm working on here. How about like Joe Biden? He's probably in the news. Here at the top here, this Top Stories Carousel. Notice all these things here have the lightning bolts in the corner. This is because it was required and is currently required to use AMP to get this Top Stories Carousel. Google did this because the new AMP would make things really fast. You could also preload the pages like this, so they were super, super fast. They could appear in this nice little carousel and all this stuff. So what they're doing now is making it, I was playing music. Stop it. Okay, good. That's gone now. Is making it so any page which meets, actually put it differently, any page that's a publisher's page can now be eligible for the Top Stories Carousel, but page experience is now a ranking factor. AMP is not required, but pages with a better page experience will rank more highly and are more likely to actually appear in the Top Stories Carousel earlier or at all. Page experience, again, is core web vitals plus other kinds of metrics like or signals like mobile friendliness, accessibility, things like that. So the question is then, what are these core web vitals? Well, okay, we can say this very quickly over here. They're supposed to be representative of various pillars of a good user experience. These 3 things. 1, is the page loading? How fast is it? Are you seeing a little scroll wheel over there or some sort of throbber, as they used to call them, or is the page appearing quickly? Number 2, is the page interactive? When it gets there, can you actually do anything, or does it wait before it's interactive? Can you scroll immediately, or is there a delay before it's possible for it to scroll? If you hit the menu button, does it react immediately or after 1 second? And finally, visual stability. Certain sites on the web, you get there on your phone and you're looking at the text and suddenly everything moves around because an image drops into the page. There wasn't space reserved for the image, so the text moves, makes space for the image. And then maybe you're looking at the text again, and maybe it moves around again because a video ad pops in. And some sites, especially recipe sites, have noticed things will move around 4 or 5 times while they're loading. This is a very unpleasant user experience. This is kind of instability. So trying to measure these 3 things. Is it loading? Is it interactive? And is it visually stable? There's a metric for each of these things. And by the way, these are metrics that were chosen for 2020 and 2021. They will be modified a little bit and updated because the web is always changing. Research always is learning new things about what's good and what's bad. These are going to change a little bit. But for now, here are your 3 core web vitals. The first being largest contentful paint, second being first input delay, third being cumulative layout shift. Largest contentful paint indicates basically speed, loading speed. First input delay is interactivity, how fast things are interactive. And cumulative layout shift is how stable is the page. Now I'm going to sip some water. Delicious. So what are these 3 things? Oh, also it's thought that it's best if you can get your pages to meet the goals here on the screen at least 75% of the time. So by the way, these are all actually, because there's now this thing called the Chrome User Experience Report, now based on actual real user data. So in the past, metrics simulations, you would go to a site like Web Page Test or some other site. It would run your page on a browser on a device somewhere or through a simulator and give you a report. Now Chrome publishes anonymized user data to this public data set. And these core web vitals use this data set. You can use it too, you can do queries against it. And this is how they're measuring the core web vitals. Real world, real user data about your site. So first of all, largest contentful paint is simply defined how long it takes the biggest thing in the viewport to render. The viewport being the thing that's on your screen there before you scroll. The biggest thing might be a hero image. It could be a giant amount of text. It could be something else, a logo. But how long does it take until that thing there shows up? That's it. Simple to define, largest contentful paint. It is thought that 2.5 seconds or less is good. If you're above 4 seconds, that's not so good. Next, first input delay. This is the time between when a user first tries to interact with a page and it actually does interact. Not the time between loading and interactivity. It's the time between the user first actually tapping something or scrolling or doing something and the browser being able to respond to this. It is thought that 100 milliseconds or less is good. 200 milliseconds or more is not so great. And finally, cumulative layout shift is the sum of all the layout shifts that occur while the page is alive. So this is a measure basically of the sum of the following. What actually moved? How big was it? How far did it move? Those 2 things multiplied together and then added together for each of the actual layout shifts that occurred, you get a score. Again, it's how big elements actually are that moved and how far they moved. So 0.1 is considered to be good, 0.25 or more is considered to be poor. So this is more than just speed. It really is speed, interactivity, and layout stability. So we did some research on these things and found that sites that meeting these thresholds found that users actually would be much less likely to abandon page loads. So it seems to actually work. People like things that are fast, that load stably, and that interact nicely. So how do Drupal sites do? I ran this through the Chrome User Experience Report and got this nice little dashboard over here. Well, there's some overlaps in the text, but not too bad dashboard. You can see that most Drupal sites don't pass, but for each individual metric, most sites do pass, especially first input delay on desktop, 98.77%, pretty impressive. Mobile tends to be lower than desktop because, of course, people tend to have lower powered phones than their computers are and worse connections on their phones than their computers. But Drupal sites are pretty good for each individual metric. Just as a whole, they in general need some work. However, this is not that bad because it turns out that actually of all the top 5 CMSs I looked at, Drupal was the best in LCP and CLS. So go Drupal. It looks like WordPress, Joomla, Drupal, Wix, and Squarespace are the ones I checked because they're the top 5 CMSs by market share. So core web vitals, I won't go over this in detail because our time is short, but you can now find these things across the various tools that Google owns and operates, including Page Speed Insights, which is a popular tool for measuring your page's speed. You'll now see these core vitals there. The Chrome User Experience Report. Again, you can actually query our data set yourself, make your own reports. Search Console, you can see which of your pages are passing and aren't passing. Chrome DevTools supports these things. Lighthouse, living within Chrome DevTools, also supports these things. And you also can get a Chrome extension that shows you Web Vital scores. So there's various ways to measure these things on your favorite site and to try to improve them if you want to. Usually I don't talk about ways to improve it, but we're running out of time already. So I can mention that AMP is not required for anything really in Google search anymore, or won't be as of May, rather, when this announcement actually comes to pass. But AMP's a pretty good way to meet these things if you use AMP, because AMP is designed to make these things happen. It kind of forces you to make your page fast and make it stable layout. And also interactivity tends to be very fast too, because they have less JavaScript. We can go into this in more detail at some point if you want to. But I want to note that the AMP WordPress plugin, which is very advanced, has all kinds of nice facilities. They're actually working on trying to take the PHP out of this and making it CMS agnostic. So any CMS can use the guts of this plugin, which reduces your CSS and does various things to make it easier to make a faster page or a faster AMP page. So what can you do about this? There are a few initiatives that we're discussing with the Drupal Association to make Drupal sites all faster by default. The main real problem is images. Images are still the biggest problem on the web in terms of speed, in fact, and size. Actually, if I go to a sample site over here, like if I go to Drupal.org, for example, if I check this, I'm probably going to find a couple large images. At least this worked back in December. It's possible they removed them by now, and maybe they won't be there anymore. Let's see if there are large images here still. Totally untested. That's JavaScript. Images. Oh yeah, okay. Well, there are some things here that are big. This over here, 673K for this image over here. This over here is 414K for this Pinterest thing. And if you look at your site over here, where does the Pinterest thing actually appear? And the previous thing we saw that was even bigger, where does that appear? Drupalcon, not above the fold, not over here. Oh, there's Drupalcon. So there's that picture over there. This could be much smaller than that because it's a pretty small picture on the site. And where's this Pinterest thing over here? Somewhere way down the page, probably. We all make this mistake. We all put images on our pages and forget how big they are. So the point is that if CMSs by default would actually give you a chance to compress things, then we'd all have smaller images, including me. I don't even know where this image is, to be honest. It's probably somewhere on the page, but I haven't found it yet. We could find it if you wanted to. It could be in this over here. There it is. It's in the image carousel. So again, making these things like maybe 20K, 30K, and lazy loading these things would be good. It turns out that something was done in Drupal actually with Google and some developers last year to lazy load images by default. This is now part of Drupal 9.1. You may know that HTML images now have a lazy loading attribute, and this is now possible to go ahead and implement right there in Drupal. So that was done already. More ideas. Oh, there's how it could look. More ideas that we've had that have not happened yet. This is from Tim, to have better image optimization tools that are client side and server side. This is an issue on the Drupal core that people could work on. One idea we've had specifically is to incorporate this thing called squoosh.app into the Drupal front end. So squoosh.app is this nice interface where you can take an image, let's say these things already exist over here, and compress it right there in the browser using WebAssembly. So you can try to, you can see over here, this is now pretty big still. We can lower the quality, so it's actually now a bunch smaller. You can compare before and after with this cute little slider and see if it really matters or not. You can resize it, all kinds of things. If an image, if an interface like this was part of CMSs like Drupal, it could be easier just to go ahead and notice, oh, my image is actually 2 megabytes. It could be instead 200K. And you could save space right there as things are uploaded. One idea that we had. Another idea that actually they had that I ended up working on was supporting AVIF. AVIF is this new image format, which tends to be even half the size of WebP and maybe a quarter the size of JPEGs and tends to look better. But support was impossible in CMSs because libgd, which is what people often use, including Drupal, to do image optimizations and image manipulation, didn't support AVIF. So they said this was missing. I began working on this myself. I just submitted a PR for this today. So if I did my code well, hopefully we'll see this pretty soon, libgd. pretty soon in PHP, and then we'll hopefully be working on getting this into CMSs like Drupal. There's more things we were talking about before about more ways to try to make Drupal sites fast by default, but I think I'm out of time. And Web Vitals, to read more, go to web.dev/vitals. And that's all I have for you. Thanks for listening.
Wow, thanks, Ben. That was great information and very efficiently done.
Sorry.
Oh no, that's fantastic. And we'd love to have you back if you want to do a deeper dive on something, another month. Or we also have upcoming lunch and learns to be scheduled, so we could schedule something during the day. Any questions for Ben?
Yep, I would have one. One question in regards of the Chrome user experience report. How is Google dealing with iOS? Because basically they're unable to run the Chrome user experience report because on iOS there's just a wrapper for WebKit. So it's more or less a blind spot, isn't it?
Yeah, you do what you can. I mean, it ends up WebKit so you can write your own browser on it. That'd be a whole different story. But yeah, you can't do what you can't do.
Okay, so it isn't. And
yeah, in that case, it's better to run it in a simulator, an emulator, or run it on a device. I think Web Page Test, it used to have iPhones, I thought. I don't know if they have any more Web Page Test. I haven't used it in about a year or so. They used to have some iPhones lying around.
Yep.
On these things.
They should.
Yeah, so that's your option for that. But yeah, that we can't do, unfortunately.
Okay. And one comment in regards of image optimization, there's also the module image optimize or image API optimize, which had the opportunity to include, for example, Marshit and binary options already.
The module I've heard, and it's the standard module you can use. The thing is that for some reason you still see sites with large images. So my videos and people I'm talking to are thinking about the same thing. People use this module, not all the time, images are still big. What if there are more ways to optimize images? Make sure they were small. And to warn you about, like, by the way, this image is 1.5 MB. Do you actually want to do that or not? So yes, there's modules that exist that do these things, but somehow large images are so prevalent, not just on Drupal sites, but all over the web. So I want things that were more proactive.
I agree.
I've certainly seen Drupal sites where maybe the image styles are configured to reduce the quality of the images, but maybe the image styles aren't actually then used by a view that outputs images or something like that, right? You have to get it right in all these different parts of the rendering pipeline to make sure that the correct optimized image is actually what reaches the browser.
It's funny how hard it is to do images right. I mean, making images is easy. Compressing them takes remembering to do it. Monitoring for large images takes work. And then serving more advanced formats, you have to often use a picture element. You can, if you're going to have AVIF so Chrome can understand it, you've got to have something else for other sites. WebP support's gotten better, but yeah, then you have to have images for different sized devices. It takes a bit of work to make a good image. There's blurry placeholders you can do. There's a lot of things out there you can do to improve images, and it just takes some work.
So AVIF is new to me. I'm curious what kind of browser support is out there for AVIF?
Right now, it's just Chrome supporting AVIF. Firefox, I believe, is working on it. But the hope is that it'll be supported more widely than WebP was, because the format itself, various companies were behind its creation. Netflix was involved in standardizing it. Facebook is doing some of the work behind figuring out how to best optimize AVIF. And Apple has been involved in this. So we're hoping that it'll take less long to get to all the browsers out there. For now, I think it's just Chrome. The way to do this then is to provide an AVIF image for Chrome, and a fallback image for other kinds of browsers. It's exciting though, because the images are so much smaller than they were before, and they actually tend to look better. It's because this comes from the AV1 from the video format, and it just takes a while longer to encode things. Once they're encoded, they're really nice. There's a good article on this you can look at. If I can find it here. If I look at AVIF, yeah, there it is. This is a nice one where Jake Archibald tries out some images of various sorts and compresses them, and shows how they look in various formats. And this one, for example, 18K for AVIF, WebP 43K, JPEG 74K. They look pretty much the same. Netflix has a nice long post on this too. There's been a number of interesting posts about the potential of this format. So it's kind of exciting.
Very cool. Any other questions for Ben?
Yeah. Hi, Ben. I was going to ask, there's quite a few fantastic web performance modules with Drupal, but it seems that most companies aren't using them. For example, we looked at Medicare.gov in the last presentation, and just doing a Lighthouse audit of that site. It's got a performance score of 6. So just thinking, what do you think are some of the reasons why a lot of Drupal sites don't do any performance optimizations?
It isn't so much Drupal sites, it's just that it's on the problem with the web, period. People just don't look at these things half the time. And when they do, they tend to regress. I mean, in some cases, it's because people aren't aware that's actually an important thing. In some cases, it's because it's hard to do. I remember working at the New York Times a couple of years ago, and we didn't like the fact that it was slow. We couldn't do much about it because we were required to use a lot of analytics pixels and advertising pixels and various things that all load first before our content loaded. And then various versions of back then jQuery and Prototype were loading and all these things were loading. We were powerless to stop it from being kind of slow. And now these days, as people get into JavaScript frameworks, which load up sometimes 500K and megabyte of minified JavaScript, those things will take time to load up and get started too. This got a 6. I'm looking over here why this might have gotten a 6. Well, of course, another large image over here, this banner image, that I actually don't see appearing here anywhere. That big takeover isn't good. Yeah, let's not look at this now, but I'm sure there's reasons why. Oh, look at that. Is that for video? YouTube. Optimizely. That's often a problem too. Often Optimizely will load before anything else visible loads, and it blocks everything for a while. Yeah, it just takes some work to discover these things on your site and just to not do them. Honestly, what would help, I think, with Drupal would be if there was a way that people wanted to have their dashboards display the bytes of JavaScript that were there, the bytes of CSS that were there, which module had loaded these things. So you could realize, oh, this module over here actually loaded 200K of JavaScript. I didn't know that. Some sort of warning system, or displaying actual performance scores in the dashboard. It would require the community to want this to happen.
Very cool. Well, Ben, thank you so much. Great information. And as I said, we'd love to hear more from you if you have an opportunity.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thank you to our other presenters as well. Similarly, we can't do these meetups, without all our great speakers. And yeah, we really appreciate it. So I'm gonna try to share my screen again here. Got a few closing slides. Ooh, let's see here. That looks like it.
Oh, there we are.
There we go. Okay. So our next meetup is in 1 month on Wednesday, March 3rd. And RSVPs are open now. So you can hop on over to bit.ly/DNYC0321. And I think someone will pop that in the chat. And we always announce our meetups first on our mailing list. And you can find the mailing list link on the description page for this meetup. And we also announce them in Slack. So that's our preferred means for getting these out to you. So next month, we have a talk scheduled, Building a High Availability Environment for Drupal with Microsoft Azure by Diego Teixeira. And we've got time for another talk or two. So if you're interested, we would love to hear from you and love to get you on the schedule. And the best way to get in touch with us for that is speak@drupalnyc.org. And you can also get in touch with us that way if you want to get involved organizing the meetup. We'd love your help. Or if you have another idea for an event you want to put on under the Drupal NYC umbrella. Okay, and we're done. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming, and I'll stop the recording, but you're free to hang around and socialize. And otherwise, we will see you next month. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, everyone, have a good week.
Great job, guys. Yeah, that was a great
Thank you.
presentations.
Thank you.